going to make roasted sweet potatoes. So for your ingredients, you'll gather up your sweet potatoes. I'm also going to be recommending we use a spray container of olive oil. This is just enough spray to coat the sweet potatoes so that the seasoning we're making will stick to them and also add a little bit of flavor to them. But we do not need an excess amount of olive oil. Remember that olive oil is a saturated fat. It's still a good fat for us, but we want to minimize it. Learning how to cook with less oil is invaluable to your heart health and to just overall nutritional recommendations. We also have paprika, some pink Himalayan sea salt. Again, I prefer the Himalayan sea salt. It has a little more of a coarse texture. It has more minerals in it than traditional table salt. And it's just found to have a nice taste and flavor. And then I have my measuring spoon and a small container for our seasoning mixture. So I purchased a bag of organic sweet potatoes. I am making a recipe that calls for 1 serving, which is 2 sweet potatoes. So I have about 8 in here because I'm quadrupling my recipe. I'm using this for meal prep, so making a large batch all at once. And then I'm going to store this in containers so that I can grab and go to add to salads, to add to bowls, to add to meals throughout the week, to change up the contents of what's in my food and the flavor of what's in my food. So it is quite helpful if you cook a large batch of this type of food, keep your leftovers and just pop it into either a quick salad, a tasty little snack. Pair these with black beans and it is phenomenal. So you'll take your sweet potatoes, you will rinse them off. You can use your potato cleaner scrubber. Once you've washed your sweet potatoes, you can keep them in your colander, maybe with a paper towel underneath to continue to grab the moisture. You could also keep them in your sink, but you're going to place a cutting board nearby. You're going to find your knife. And if you happen to have one of these handy dandy food scrapers, they come in handy. The most important thing is that you chop or dice these into small chunks. The larger the chunk, the longer it's going to take to cook. Smaller chunks will take a shorter period of time to cook, and you can really crisp them much more quickly. I like to cut the ends of my sweet potatoes off. I like to cut them in maybe round quarters. I also make sure to lift my fingers out of the way. And then however you choose to make small chunks of your sweet potato, you can then place those in a bowl. And in the bowl is where we're going to coat with olive oil and add our seasoning mixture. So the recipe I'm following calls for about 2 sweet potatoes. I am multiplying this times 4 because of the volume that I want to make. So I'm using about 8 sweet potatoes. So once you've diced up your sweet potatoes, you can't really goof this up. So any size cube that you get, great. We're going to grab our spoon and we're next going to make our seasoning concoction. So this particular recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of olive oil for 2 potatoes. We have 8 potatoes, so that would make for 8 tablespoons of olive oil, which is, in my opinion, excessive, which is why we're going to use the spray. So we will spray these sweet potatoes so that our seasoning sticks to the mixture. We will be using sea salt and paprika. 1 teaspoon of paprika times 4 gives us 4 teaspoons of paprika for this recipe, and it calls for a ½ teaspoon of salt for 2 potatoes, so a ½ teaspoon times 4 is going to give us 2 teaspoons of salt. And so we're going to do 4 teaspoons of paprika. And then because I don't mind intermixing my measuring spoon and my salt, we're going to do just under 2 teaspoons of salt. And again, we're not sitting down to eat this large quantity of these roasted sweet potatoes. These are meant to be a handful thrown into a salad or into a grain bowl or something that we're adding into, not making a full meal out of. So once we have the paprika and we have the sea salt, we mix it up and it gives a very colorful creation. And now, instead of pouring 8 tablespoons of olive oil into our sweet potatoes, we're going to spray them and we're going to mix them. And you may even want to, as you spray these and mix them, pour your sweet potatoes into another container so you're only doing half at a time. And as we mix in our seasoning, you can always find that you might need to add a little more olive oil spray to certain areas of the sweet potatoes. Once we get them on the baking sheet, you can also coat them with a light layer of olive oil if you choose to. All right, so once you feel like you kind of got most or all of your sweet potatoes coated, we're going to take our mixture and we're going to just lightly dump a little bit on this top layer and mix it in. And when we go to put these on our baking sheets, if you feel like you don't see enough seasoning on these and you want a little more, you can make up a little bit more and just sprinkle it on. And I'm going to use my measuring spoon just to do a little more of the sprinkling rather than dumping it too heavy in one area. And this is mixing in quite nicely. So once you have everything pretty well mixed up, the next step is going to be to grab your baking sheet and parchment paper. You can use aluminum foil if you prefer. I would lightly spray the aluminum foil, but with parchment paper, you don't need to put anything down. I'm using the pre-cut parchment paper just because that's what they had at the store when I was there. Sometimes the roll is a little less expensive. The pre-cut, though, saves a little bit of frustration. So when you go to pour your sweet potatoes out on your baking sheet, you do want to make sure you don't overcrowd them and spread them out. And these are actually all very nicely coated. And when you have just a nice layer of your sweet potatoes on your pan, they're going to crisp up a whole lot easier than if you accidentally get a few stacked on top of each other. The ones that are stacked will not crisp. They'll cook, but they won't have a nice little crunch to them. So now that you have those added out, I am just going to do a light spray over all of these. And then I'm going to grab a second baking sheet and do the same thing to this. Once you have both of your baking sheets ready to go, you'll place them in an oven that was preheated to 425 degrees. You'll roast these approximately 20 to 30 minutes. And you'll know they're done when you can stick a fork through them and the fork glides in easily. I really like mine to be cooked very well, almost where they get almost a little blackened on the bottom. This is something that you'll cook to taste. So to just have them done, cook them around 20 to 30 minutes, stick a fork in them. If it's a little difficult to get it through, cook a little longer. Once the fork slides through easily, then you can gauge based on your taste. These are, again, a great addition to putting in a grain bowl, a salad, sometimes just mixing them or placing them on a plate with some prepared black beans, even some tortilla chips with that if you like, can make for a very, very nourishing meal.
And here we have our finished product.